Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Greg Gallant, who is the co-founder and CEO of Muckrack. Something cool that Muckrack is doing right now is they're leveraging AI specifically for PR to help companies grow businesses by generating positive media coverage, whether it's for mentions or managed brand rep as well. He's also the creator of the Shorty Awards, started a podcast in 2005. Greg, welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man.
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm pumped, man. I love how ahead of tech you were back in 2005. Some of the things you shared with me on the pre-show. By the way, I didn't mean to discount you. He's also a speaker at South by Southwest at Harvard Business School, and he's mentored countless startups as well. So you got your hands busy in a lot of different areas. So before we get too deep into what's kind of happening, let's do a real quick revenue rundown on where you and the organization are at kind of in your stage of the journey. So give us an idea on where you guys are at from the revenue journey perspective for Muckrack.
Yeah, so we bootstrapped the whole company, always grown profitably. We called it our Series A, our growth round in 2022, or as a minority round where we raised 180 million. Where we are now, we're approaching 300 employees. We're still profitable. We just completed our first acquisition of another company called Keyhole, a social listening company, about a month ago. So we've gotten it to scale, but we've always done it in a very sustainable way, not hiring ahead of revenue and being very focused on the customers who we view as our bosses at the end of the day.
Okay, awesome, man. Well, first of all, to get to 300, primarily bootstrapping, I think that's fantastic. I love how you take a Series A when you're closer to 300 employees, or did you take that when you had 250, or what level did you take on the funding?
Yeah, I think we were about like 200 employees around then.
Okay.
So we were already a pretty big scale.
Nice, man. That is big, especially for a bootstrap company. So can you walk us through exactly what Muckrack does in 2 or 3 sentences, just so we have some context? I know I gave a quick overview of it, but would love your version of it as well.
Sure thing. The way to think about it, it's like a software platform, kind of like what Salesforce is to sales for the PR department. Could either be an in-house PR department at a company ranging from, we have lots of Fortune 500 customers, but also lots of startups. And then PR agencies, large and small, use it too. And it kind of does 3 things for these PR professionals. It helps them find the right journalists, as well as monitor and manage their relationships. I should say not just journalists, but it helps them find podcasters, newsletter writers, really anyone they want to kind of get that earned media from, that pre-press. Then monitor the news. So especially for bigger companies, they need to know the instant they're mentioned anywhere online, on TV, in print, now on social media with our acquisition, and have that all in one place. And finally, it's a reporting tool. So if you're at a big company and you want to say, hey, look at how much press we're getting relative to our competitors, how's it trending over time, where are we getting the press from, how's it driving various business impacts, we've got a whole suite of reporting tools and dashboards to let PR people kind of be their own data scientists.
Okay. Love that, man. So it sounds like you're looking at everything from reporters to podcasts to attention, like wherever the attention is for organic traffic, so that you can leverage that. Is that like a good kind of description of it?
Yeah, perfectly said. It's all about how do you get that organic traffic, that earned media. Like if you're doing something interesting, how do you get people to want to cover it and talk about it?
Okay, awesome, man. Well, that's cool. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the AI integration with PR, right? So we have not had anybody on the show to talk about the integration of AI and PR. So I'm pretty excited to hear your thoughts. So like, being that you created an entire platform for this, like, where do you see the best opportunities to leverage AI specifically for PR? And then how are you doing that within the product as well?
Yeah, it's something we're really excited about. And I think it kind of continues the mission that we've had ever since we started, which was in PR. Everyone gets into it because they have a story to tell. They're creative. They want to get the word out there. But then what happens is there's just a ton of tedious things to do, putting lists together, looking up contact info, kind of collating how it all comes together, that we've long been automating, and we've been using the machine learning part of AI for well over a decade, and now adding in a lot of the more advanced tools and generative AI that's come out more recently is really exciting to take that to the next level. So one of the big challenges in PR is figuring out, like, who should I pitch to? You know, like if I want to get my story out there to business people, how do I discover Ryan's podcast? How do I know who at the New York Times is the right person to talk to? Which are the 5 Substacks that'll have the biggest impact? And that's always been something that we've solved with our search engine, where you can search and say, hey, show me which journalists, podcasters, newsletter writers are talking about my competitors, my industry, really any keyword you want. But it's still kind of tedious to have to do those searches and can take a long time to go through. So we've recently launched a journalist recommendation tool. So once you have your kind of base media list, or you can upload a media list that you already have. Media list, for anyone not in the industry, is just a list of journalists and podcasters, anyone you want to reach out to. And then it'll automatically select additional ones to add there. Kind of like when you have your playlist on Spotify and you've got your 10 favorite songs, and it's like, well, you should add this song and that song based on who else is there. It brings that kind of ease of use to it. That's just one example, but we also are doing a lot to analyze stories on the reporting side, monitoring, giving quicker views into what journalists are all about. So there are a lot of areas where AI can just kind of take the busy work out of it, so people can focus on their relationships.
Okay, yeah, I think that's strong. And so, like, underneath the tech, like, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but are you using like RAG from a search mechanism to use that at all, or no? Like, and here's where I'm going with this, right? Because like I like to draw the analogies of like using Google search versus Perplexity, right? Obviously, with Perplexity, is the way Perplexity is searched, like it's so much more efficient at aggregating information and pulling up details. Are you leveraging something similar, or like how are you distilling like all the information out there to make it hyper valuable and tight? Because it sounds like obviously you have it nailed. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, we're pushing towards that that direction. And I think that the journalist recommendation is the first big piece of it, where I think, we still give the users the ability to find journalists with kind of the old, setting up the search exactly how they want to with the keywords and the Boolean. But the way that it's moving, and what we've been making really big investments in enabling, is taking it to that kind of Perplexity level, where it's like, hey, just make the list for me and show me why you did it, and then let me tweak it and add the human judgment. So it's something we're excited for. Like, I always think of it like that kind of first draft that, like, a few years ago you'd have been like, okay, I'm going to take the junior person on my team, they'll make the first draft, and then I'll look at it. Now I think AI is at a level where it'll make that. It's not going to make the level that you'd expect from a VP, or maybe even a director, but you're going to get that first draft that you might have expected from like an intern or associate, and that'll just make everyone a lot more efficient, because then you can
Okay,
tweak
nice. So it's
and bring
also
it
doing
on.
it on the communications aspect as well. Okay, so and it's funny. I was really thinking about this like when we started, but something that like as we're talking. So I love that you're surfacing like the most appropriate targets, right, for attention. And I think I like attention, or distribution is kind of like the key word to look at it, because like that's what it seems like everybody's after right now. So I guess like something that I'm curious about is like if you're trying to grow distribution and attention, what are you seeing the best use cases for your platform, that the way people are leveraging what you're providing with those outputs to really create that at scale for, let's say, a small company? It doesn't have to be a big company. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, the challenge with PR is you really need to step back and think, what's newsworthy about what you're doing. And I think entrepreneurs like myself are the worst at doing this because it's our baby. Everything feels special about it. But you have to try to get that outside perspective or just read the news. Another big thing is to look at what's happening in the news and what people are writing about. Because one of the biggest things that drives a journalist or a podcast or anyone to cover something is like, does it connect to something big in the news? Some people call it newsjacking. Other people just call it kind of, relating to a trend. But generally, like if something's out there, it relates to some bigger trend. So I think it's kind of stepping out of that day-to-day of running a business and thinking, what are we doing that's newsworthy? And it might not have, the same thing to do with what you want to tell your board or your team, but figure out what's newsworthy. And then once you know what you're doing, which piece of what you're doing is newsworthy, then going into a tool like Muckrack and figuring out like, okay, who's covering, who's on trend, who's already writing about this trend that we're a part of, about our competitive set, about our industry, and making a very targeted list of those journalists. And in that sense, it's kind of, I know you have a background in sales, Ryan. It's kind of like prospecting in that sense with sales, where it's like, okay, we got to get on people's radar. But the key is to really be focused and to also realize that these journalists are getting dozens, in some cases hundreds of pitches a day. And there's a huge imbalance where there's 6 PR people now for every 1 journalist, not to mention other people trying to pitch them too. So I think, what we always try to preach and what we see is effective is get the list that you want to cover you down to a smaller list, maybe start with 5 or 10 folks, and then put a lot of effort into customizing each email, referencing past articles they wrote, explaining why it's relevant to their beat. If it's a podcast like this, the people listening who want to pitch Ryan, right? Like you'd expect that they're going to listen to your past episodes and reference them and say, know your criteria for who you want to have as a guest and say how they meet it. That might be very different than the next podcaster. So it's really getting that pitch down, sending it. I think it's fine to follow up once or twice if you don't get a response, as long as the initial pitch is good. And we see that in surveys from journalists too. And that's what we see is kind of the formula for
kind
success.
of the sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, man. Well, unfortunately, we are up on time. Where can people find you? Where can they find out more about Muckrack? And then we will be back with part 2.
Yeah, best thing to do is check out our website, Muckrack, MUCKRACK.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. I'm just at Gregory because I signed up early. Or you can search for me on LinkedIn, where I don't have a cool username, but I'm just there as Greg Gallant.
Greg, well, thanks, man. Really appreciate you being on the show. And this was a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
No problem. And we will see you on the next episode.